everybody. For the last couple of videos, we've been talking about problems, like what the problem of homelessness really looks like in our community, and what sorts of problems cause a person or cause a family to enter into homelessness. Well, in this video, we're going to talk about solutions, and we're going to talk about some of the things that organizations like us, like Family Promise of Wake County, do to help families who are experiencing homelessness find stable, permanent housing. So once again, you know the routine by now. I'm going to ask a question. I'm going to put it up here on the screen. You're going to pause the video and think about it or talk about it or write it down for a little while. And then once you've done that, you can hit play again and we'll pick back up. And as always, I'll be here waiting for you. So here's the question, or in this case, a couple of questions. What are some organizations that you know of that are addressing the problem of homelessness? And what solutions do they use? What are some organizations that you're aware of that help to address homelessness? And what are some of the solutions that they use? All right, go ahead and hit pause. I'll see you in just a minute. All right, everybody, welcome back. Let's talk about some of the different solutions that different organizations use to help address homelessness. One way that some organizations are helping to address homelessness is by trying to prevent it altogether. And this is a solution or a tactic that's called, well, prevention. What we've found here at Family Promise is that a family with one child can be prevented from experiencing homelessness, can stay in their stable, permanent home for just $750. They just need some help paying those back utility bills that we talked about before, or back rent, because they had an emergency that put them at risk for a time. So, prevention. But what if the ball is already rolling? And by that I mean, what if a family is getting ready to lose their home? Is there a way that we can divert them from needing to stay in a shelter and put them in another stable, permanent home? Well, yes. And this is where something called rapid rehousing comes in. It's another one of those pretty self-explanatory terms. It's just rehousing a family rapidly. It's quickly finding a family something more stable and permanent than a shelter. But what if a family isn't really ready for a new house? So think of it this way. This is a picture of me at the state fair several years ago. I paid $1 to milk a cow, or to try to milk a cow. I don't know how to milk a cow, okay? I grew up in more urban environments, and so clearly I have no idea what to do with this cow. Now I want you to imagine that somebody comes to me and says, "Hey Jeff, I have the best news for you. You are going to inherit a farm. All of your problems are going to be solved. You can move in tomorrow. Are you ready?" Well, on one hand, great. But on the other hand, no, I'm not ready. I don't know how to run a farm. Plus, I have 2 very young kids. I don't need a bunch of animals running around to take care of too, right? Look, I'm just not ready. And it might be the same way with some families. They just might not be ready if you go to them and say, "Hey, we found you a house, you can move in tomorrow." They might not be ready to be able to afford the payments on the mortgage or the insurance. They might not know how to handle the sometimes very complicated nuances of homeownership. This is where a third solution comes in. It's called transitional housing. A transitional housing program is where somebody or a family can stay for up to a year while they prepare themselves financially for home ownership. And then they can move into something more stable and more permanent when their life circumstances are ready for that. But maybe a family doesn't need all that. Maybe they're just plain temporarily down and out and they need a temporary place to stay just for the time being. This is where emergency shelter is offered. An emergency shelter is very short term, and it just allows people to get back on their feet for just a couple of weeks. Okay, one last one. What happens if somebody leaves a transitional housing program, they are ready to go, or they've entered into rapid rehousing and they found a stable, permanent place to live, But then suddenly a year later, they have another one of those emergencies like we talked about in the last video. What if they're suddenly at risk again? Well, this is where something called post-shelter stabilization comes in. Another complicated sounding term, but really it's self-explanatory. Post-shelter stabilization is just providing stability after somebody leaves a shelter. Post-shelter stabilization. And there are a lot of different ways that different organizations do this. Sometimes it's by offering reduced rent for a given time, or sometimes it's just offering regular assistance from people who have graduated from another program. There are a lot of different ways to do this. Now, I just told you a lot of terms that might be completely new to you. A lot of it may have gone over your head, but guess what? You don't need to remember all of it. There's not going to be a test. I just brought up all of these different solutions and all of these different programs to address something that I said a lot in the last video, which is there is no single way into homelessness. There's no one reason why families enter into homelessness. And therefore, there's no one single solution that's going to work for everybody. There's no one single program that's going to fit every single family's needs. Some of these programs are going to work for some families and they're just not going to work for other families. And that's okay. In fact, that's why we at Family Promise of Wake County offer all of these different programs. It's so that we can help as many different people as possible from as many different backgrounds as possible. So I want to wrap this one up with just a couple of thoughts once again. And the first one is that now that you've participated in Night Without a Bed, you might start thinking about homelessness a little bit more. It might come up in conversation a little bit more, you might read about it more, or listen to podcasts about it, or learn more about it. And eventually you're going to hear a lot of different potential solutions to this massive issue. Always keep an open mind when talking about solutions. Because like I said before, there's no one way into homelessness, and so there's no one way out of homelessness. We need to keep an open mind and we need to be listening to one another as we try to imagine different solutions to this issue. And the second thing that I want to say, and this is absolutely crucial, is that all of these different solutions rely on the strength and the resiliency of the families themselves. Remember how in the previous videos I talked about some of the shame that's associated with experiencing homelessness? We may fall into the trap of thinking that if somebody needs to ask for help using one of the different programs or solutions that we offered up before, that it's some sort of sign of weakness. It is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of strength. In our 30 years of operation, we've worked with almost 2,000 families. They work hard. And some of the best solutions that we have found honor that hard work and dignify that hard work and empower families to use their own strength to find solutions for themselves. Above all, the last thing I'll say is to remember to have compassion for one another. And remember, you don't know what somebody is going through. We don't know everybody's stories. And it's that kind of compassion that brought you to do Night Without a Bed tonight in the first place, to help us raise money and awareness about this issue. And it's that kind of compassion that's going to make you somebody who helps us to end homelessness in our community. Thank you so much for being a part of this year's Night Without a Bed, everybody. Have a good one.